and reaching out to me and trying to help me. And when I was far away from the church, that wanted me back and would call me. And I just felt discarded. I just felt alone. And it kind of reminded me of that feeling on that boat. I just felt like I was on a stinky boat with just my family in the middle of nothing, all by myself. And I was just wondering what, why, where. That was my feeling. And I was just wondering, man, did sometimes you just feel like God forgets you? But He doesn't, right? And God remembered me. And it was funny because that week, when they told me that, you see, Pastor Rich and Trina, for 3 years, they'd been talking about planting Great Lakes Church. And we were always talking about, oh man, we would love to plant a church with you guys. It'd be so awesome. It'd be so amazing. But it was just never in the cards. It was just never worked out where I was like, no, things are so great where we're at. And they always were at the time. And so I was just blown away. And the week that they told me that I wasn't receiving a paycheck anymore, Rich and Trina sat down with Jess and I. And we marked out the plans to finally launch Great Lakes Church. And God remembered me. Right? And God remembered. And this is the awesome part. I was able, because of the way church politics go, I was able to announce my resignation before they got to announce my firing, right? So some of you appreciate that. But it's God doesn't forget us. And He doesn't forget you where you're at. And some of you are in that situation, and some of you are dealing with those things. And just remember, God didn't forget you. And He didn't forget Noah. He didn't forget all those animals on board. And so we'll pick up there at verse 3. At the end of the 150 days, the water had gone down. And the 7th day of the 7th month, the ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. The waters continued to recede until the 10th month. On the first day of the 10th month, the tops of the mountains became visible. Eventually in our lives, those floods, they go away, right? And this wasn't just this 150 days, right? Can you imagine the feeling that Noah must have felt? This started 100 years ago. He started building this boat. And so he finally starts to see the end of this storm and this flood. And I just can't imagine what he felt like when he heard those words from God in verse 16. God said, Noah, come out of the ark, you and your wives and your sons and their wives. So Noah came out together with his sons and his wife and his sons' wives. All the animals and all the creatures that move along the ground and all the birds, everything that moves on the earth, come out of the ark, one kind after another. And then verse 20, then Noah built an altar to the Lord. And taking some of all the clean animals and clean burns, he sacrificed burnt offerings. Now first, my mind directly goes to that animal that had to endure that whole trip. And then get sacrificed. That was the first thing I thought about. I don't know if you're thinking the same way. But I was like, man, that's rough. But I think about that day when he stepped out of that ark and how much he loved God and how much more his faith, how much stronger his faith was after that whole thing. And I just wondered, can you imagine meeting Noah? And this is where I really want to get into. Can you imagine meeting Noah after that happened, anytime in his life, and not hearing about that story? Do you think you could meet Noah and get through a conversation without him bringing up that story? There's no way, right? Because it was such an impacting event. It was such a big story in his life that I would have to tell it to every person that crossed my path, to every person that had a doubt about who God was. I would have to say, listen, you should have seen it. You should have seen it. He would tell that story over and over and over again. People were probably sick of hearing it. But his kids would tell that story about how his dad stood strong in the faith and fought through it. And his grandkids would tell their kids that story. And then eventually gets written down, right? And so this huge story impacts our world today. One big story can change the lives of billions. And I love that Noah wasn't just chosen because he was a cool guy, right? God wasn't like, this dude's cool, we're going to start the world over with him, right? He picked Noah because he saw something inside Noah that said, this guy can start over and he will share his story. And the people that know Noah are going to know me because of what I did in Noah's life. And so he chose Noah to go and do that, to restart the world that he began with Adam and Eve, with the command to go, and he says, go and repopulate the world. And he does it so that people will know God. Right? That's why we started over. Remember the first Sunday of the series, something big had to happen because it was bad. People were far from God. And he said the only way from here is to start over and start fresh. And so fast forward to our day, Jesus gives us the same command that God gave Noah. Not to repopulate the world, but to tell the people in this world about God. Right? We spent the last series last month, we really hammered this in, and I'm going to hammer it in probably as long as you know me. Matthew 28, right? The Great Commission. Read it with me here. I know you guys know. There we go. All authority, read it with me, in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. It's a charge to the church to tell people about God. And sometimes we just leave it at that. It's the church's job to tell people about God. But I ask you this morning, who's the church? Who's the church? We are. Say, I'm the church. You're the church. And so it's a charge to each one of us to go and make disciples. And I love what Trina said when she was up here, and when we don't plan all this stuff out, when she said, there's all these steps that people bring to the table to tell people about God, but I just wanted to tell them my story. Right? And when we preach the Bible, it's stories, right? If you know me, I love telling stories because they're impactful. Big stories change lives. And I just want you to remember this morning from 2 weeks ago, everybody's got something big going on, right? We've all got something big going on. And so we've all got a story. And when God steps into our lives, you remember, he leaves a big footprint. And we can show that to people. We can take that and say, this is what God's done in my life. I know there's no way that you're going to know me and not know that I love Jesus. That's the goal. You see, there's this huge debate right now in my class about whether the Great Commission was a charge or whether it was an optional thing. And I want to let you know that there's no way in the world that when Christ died and rose again, that those disciples, that those apostles, that those people that were Christ's followers weren't going to tell every person in the world. There was nothing going to stop them. There was nothing that could keep them from telling that story. And so just like with Noah, and just like with Abraham, and every story, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, all the way down the line, David, they all tell their story so that you can know who God is. And so my charge this morning to you is tell your story. We all know somebody in our lives that needs to hear about the saving grace, the power of Jesus Christ. You can think of a person in your head right now, you can probably think of 3. And so I just challenge you this morning to go do that. To tell people your big story. Because one big story can change billions of lives. Would you pray with me this morning?